Hi, today I'm here to talk to you about how we plan on raising our child bilingual. If you don't know anything about me, if this is the first video that you're watching of mine, I am originally from Brazil, but I live in the UK with my British husband and my British son. Being from Brazil, my native language is Portuguese, but from a very early age I learned to speak English, and then when I moved to the UK I became even more fluent, and as you can see from the way that I'm talking now, I can communicate in English just as well as I can in Portuguese. And from a very early stage, when we started talking about having children, my husband and I decided that we wanted our children to be able to speak fluently both languages, because my side of the family only speaks Portuguese, and although some of my closer family, like my sister, brother and mother, can understand English, my family is huge with cousins and uncles and aunties and grandmas, and they don't speak English. So we always liked the idea of our children being able to speak with my side of the family as well as with my husband's side of the family. When I was pregnant, I thought a lot about this. I did a lot of research on how I was going to do this. I know that my son is not even at the stage where he's speaking. He's only just 9 months old. He's just blabs. But I think it's important to have a strategy, or to start thinking about what you're going to do from very early on, so that you prepare yourself and you know what you're getting yourself into. I know it's not going to be the easiest of things, and one of my main concerns was whether or not this was going to affect James's speech and developing his language skills and being able to speak appropriately for his age. I think we're in a little bit of a different situation than the majority of parents who want to raise their children bilingually, because from what I've seen, 99% of people are either parents who are able to speak both languages fluently, so let's say both parents would speak Portuguese and English fluently, or both parents speak only one language and the child is immersed in another language. So in that case, the parents would both speak Portuguese and the child would be raised in an English-speaking country, so the child would pick up the language from the living environment and the other language from the parents. Nowhere have I seen, well, at least in my research, I have not come across many cases, maybe only a couple of cases, where parents want to raise their children bilingually when one of the parents can speak both languages and the other parent can only speak one language, which is our case, because my husband Matthew only speaks English and I speak English and Portuguese. So the methods that I've researched so far don't really apply to us, and this video is more about saying how we are planning on taking an approach for raising James bilingual based on this fact, and also to ask you guys for some tips if you've gone through it and if you're in the same position as we are, and if you know what to do, if you think there's something that I should be doing immediately or that I should be thinking about doing, please leave it on the comments below. I would love to know your recommendations, because I think that's the best way, is to see what's tried and tested and what other people have done and see if it works for you and your family. Basically, if you don't know anything about raising your children bilingually, I think the main theory is what they called one parent, one language, and that's when one of the parents always speaks with the child in the language that they're trying to teach them. That's the only language that that parent communicates with that child. So if the child then starts to talk to you on the second language, you'll always reply in the first language, or the language that you're trying to teach them, so that the child associates that parent with that particular language, and that way they'll be forced to speak that language if they want to get what they want. So that's an approach that would not work in our case, because my husband doesn't speak Portuguese. So I couldn't simply just speak Portuguese to James, because there are situations where I have to speak English so that he's getting the information from both of us for whatever reason, or when we're around my husband's family that they only speak English. It might be easier for other people, but it's not easy for me to suddenly switch off and go into Portuguese in the middle of a room full of people who don't speak Portuguese. I don't like that feeling of excluding myself from this conversation or excluding other people. Like, it looks as though we're talking like in a secret language, a secret code. I know it's not, and I know that many people would not mind, they wouldn't bother, they know what we're trying to do, but I don't feel comfortable doing that. As well, I speak English to Matthew, so it would be a bit confusing to James if I'm telling him you can only speak Portuguese to Mummy because Mummy only speaks Portuguese and Daddy is the one who speaks English, when he would see me speaking English to Matthew. And I know in an ideal... Sorry, I got distracted. And I know in an ideal world my husband would be able to speak Portuguese as well, and I've been trying a lot and he wants to learn Portuguese, but we've got to work with what we've got, and at the moment he can't speak the language. He can understand very little from what he's gathered all over the years of me speaking Portuguese to my family, but he is nowhere near being fluent enough for us to be able to communicate in Portuguese. Another thing that doesn't help is that I don't have any family here of mine from Brazil in the UK, so I don't get to speak Portuguese often. I speak English pretty much, I'd say 99.9% of my time, and I do speak to my mum every day on the phone, and that's where I get my Portuguese fix most of the time, and when my family comes to visit as well, obviously. But apart from that, I don't really get in contact with anyone who speaks Portuguese here in the UK so that I can have James exposed to that. So these are our main challenges. So what we've been doing so far, which is all we can do because James still can't speak, is reading books to him in Portuguese. I make sure that in the daytime I try to read to him as much as possible. He doesn't really get the reading thing yet. He does like to look at the pictures in the book, and he does sit kind of quietly because he's a very fidgety baby, but he sits quietly and listens to me reading to him as much as possible. Then he wants to just eat the book or just crawl about. But anyway, I try to get that sound in his mind because I know it's important from this age now to get them to listen to the sounds, to listen to the vowels and the consonants together and how words sound. And certain sounds are quite difficult to master once you start learning a new language, and I was quite glad that I started learning English when I was young so that I was able to practice all these sounds. And I'm sure if I was much older trying to learn English, I would never get to this level that I have now of English. I think it's also a little bit of, it's within me to learn languages easily. I've always found it, not easy, but I've always found it enjoyable. It's not easy to learn a new language, but I've always found it easier than other things like maths and physics and history and geography. I've always found languages much easier. Also, that phone call that we do to my mother in the morning every day helps a lot because he not only gets used to listening how the words sound, but he gets used to hearing how the words sound in context, in conversation. Listening to a conversation for a baby is one of the most important things that you can do for their language development, because that's how they're going to learn how, that whole back and forth thing works. They don't just instinctively know, and they learn by observing and by copying you and by seeing what you do, and then they repeat it. So I've noticed that he's much better at interacting with my mum now, because we've been doing those everyday morning phone calls to her for quite a while now. So he's getting used to that, and that's great to see, because at first I didn't think that he was doing anything. I thought surely he's looking at a screen and he doesn't really understand what's happening, but now you can see that whenever she comes on and she says hello in Portuguese, or oi or hola, which is hello in Portuguese, he responds to it. He smiles at her, and then she asks for a kiss and he smiles, and it's just nice to see that it's working in that way already. Another thing which is nice to do for your children if you're trying to raise them bilingual, it's expose them to TV content if you're a parent that lets your children watch TV. I know many parents don't, but we do. And expose them to TV content in the language that you're trying to teach them. I like to show James cartoons in Portuguese, and he enjoys them too, I think. I don't think he differentiates between what's in Portuguese and what's in English, but he enjoys them all the same, and I think that's nice. That's one tip that everybody asks me whenever they say, how did you learn English? How did you become so fluent in English? And one thing that really helped me in particular was to immerse myself in the English culture as much as possible, living in another country, living abroad. So in Brazil, what I did was I used to always watch TV shows in English. I used to always try to memorize and learn lyrics in English, and I found that enjoyable. Call me geeky, but I did. And that, I think that's what helped the most, because I was constantly looking at the words in the subtitles of the movies and the TV series, and linking it to how it sounded by looking at how the mouth moved, and I would copy it then, and that really helped me. And I think if I do that to James, reversely, if I get him to see how the words look on the mouth and how they sound in Portuguese, that will help him a lot with his becoming bilingual. I know that with this method of mine, he will never be as fluent as if we were using the one parent, one language method, and it might be a longer road to becoming bilingual, but I think we will count it as a success if he can understand Portuguese, and from then onwards, if he can actually speak Portuguese fluently, or even not fluently but speak well, then I'll be happy, I'll be content. I think it's important that he understands my family more than anything. He's been raised here in the UK, so his main language will always be English, and I'm sure he'll feel more confident talking in English than in Portuguese, but it's just nice to have that. And I think in many years time he'll probably be grateful of our efforts to try and raise him bilingual, because having a second language does help you out in life. Portuguese might not be the most popular of languages, but it is still a second language, and you can't say that it's better to not have it. These are our efforts to raise James bilingual, and as you can see, I don't have many tips to offer. I'm really sorry. I'm at the start of my journey, but I'm more here to ask for your help and your tips and your insight into how you've done it, or how you've seen it done to other children, or maybe something that you know that I don't know about raising children bilingual, especially in my situation where one parent speaks both languages and the other only speaks one language. So yeah, I'll leave on the description box below all the links to the websites that I've read, that I've found useful, and maybe you're going through the same and you're looking for a place to start. You don't know, how to start and what is that you can do. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you can see more videos from me. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.